Still got 1 minute left. You taught me that. Oh, is the CAO here? Yes, he is. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the council meeting for January 31st, 2023. As we have quorum, it is 7 p.m. and I will call the meeting to order. I would like to acknowledge that the city of Maple Ridge carries out its business on the traditional and unceded territory of the Katzie First Nation and the Kwantlen First Nation. Can I get a motion for, are there any amendments? Wait, are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Councillor Duick, seconded by Councillor Youssef. Can I, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, great. Can I get a approval for the adoption of the minutes? Moved by Councillor Schiller, seconded by Councillor Tan. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And now we're going to go to item 6.1, delegations. We have Rob Thiessen. Rob here? Oh, there he is.
Mr. Thiessen is here to provide an update on the emergency weather shelter program. Please.
So just as a by way of introduction, Mr. Thiessen has been a part of the Community Social Safety Initiative since it started about 2019. And so when we were faced in late December or late November to put in an emergency weather shelter, we got it up and running, but we didn't have a nonprofit to take over and run it continuously. And so Rob, with the relationships that he's had building with that community safety initiative, with the city and with his own relationships with other service providers over the years, took that over for us and helped run it until we were able to successfully move it over to Coast Mental Health. So we wanted to come tonight and to give you an update on how that went and that transition.
Thank you. You have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I believe this is the first time I'm addressing this new council, so it's my privilege to be here tonight. And frankly, the subject that I'm going to talk about is also something that has worked out real well. And I want to acknowledge the city's courage to step up and start this when there wasn't the appropriate nonprofit in place to do it. There was a need out there. It was cold and people needed to get in out of the cold. So on the 30th of November, 29th, I had a meeting here, I believe, with several staff members asking if I would pick up the ball and get everything put together. I asked for 3 hours to consider and ponder. I took that 3 hours to find out what's already in place and begin to check out where I could find the appropriate shelter workers, which seemed to be the issue with the existing nonprofit that was supposed to pick up this project. I was grateful to know that they had a location in place, Maple Ridge Alliance Church, and I also had a relationship with them because the organization I used to run, Hope for Freedom Society, had run shelters in this city back in 2017, I believe. Since then, I've retired from that organization, but I had established some relationships in here with several churches, and of course, some relationships with the city, because we actually ran a shelter that should have required a lot of rezoning and so on, and they decided just to let it go and get people in out of the cold. So we accomplished that, and so starting for the month of December, I was tasked with, first of all, finding appropriate shelter workers, which I was able to do relatively quickly. And the process I had to be streamlined. So I had several interviews and then made some decisions. Couldn't get criminal records checks in place in time because that takes too long now, or long. So sat them down, looked them in the eye and said, what are we going to find? And they were honest with me, I believe. And I knew two of the people that I hired, and they were from my former organization. And when they heard that there was a need out here for that, they actually took a leave from their jobs at Hope for Freedom and agreed to be shelter workers. So I was able to establish a lead shelter worker very quickly. And then the rest of the people, the 6 people or the 4 people that I hired, all came from the city of Maple Ridge. So it worked out fairly well. And I knew that I was throwing these guys against the wall to see if they'd stick. And they did. So I was very grateful for that. I shadowed them. I was there for several nights. So it was a kind of for an old man, it was a little tough to work all day and then also work all night. But we were able to shadow them and find out their competency and work out. So we were able to immediately shelter. Our highest rate was 19 people. We stayed in the teens throughout that period in December. There was a fairly high ratio of women, which I hadn't experienced in the past, which I found interesting. Did a little research on that and found out that in Metro Vancouver, the number of women that are showing up, the percentage of women that are showing up homeless has gone up rather alarmingly. So that's another thing, I guess, the problem our province is going to have to face is the resources for women that provide some safe spaces for them. So we attempted to do that, and I think we achieved that. But the primary thing, there was some stumbling initially because things weren't in place, and I had to appreciate Maple Ridge staff and various departments of the city that stepped in and helped out, the fire department and others, and helped make it work, which was it's a credit to this city for being able to do that. I've worked with several other civic governments, both in Canada and the US, and I don't think any of them would have stepped up like this city did. They would have blamed the province or they would have blamed the state and left it there. So I was very much impressed with that. And I've been making noise about that when I've talked to people in other communities. Because again, I was really, very happy that's the way it worked out. So we were able to provide the people that came in a warm place to sleep. We were able to provide a hot meal for them pretty much every night except one. And then the other thing that we had to sort, of course, is finding a nonprofit that would pick up the ball. There was one that did decide to pick the ball up, and then it was orientating them, which I began to do to pass it over. I had a planned vacation on January 6th. I was leaving town and my wife looked me in the eye and told me, this time I'm not going to let you postpone it. So it was kind of rushed, but we were able to get things going. And frankly, the transition went very, very smoothly. Coastal Mental Health had never run a shelter like this before in their history. Their new ED, Keir McDonald, had run organizations that had done this. So there was some experience at the very top end, but everybody else was pretty new to the whole deal. But they put things together pretty quickly. They resolved some issues with respect to laundry, and they are providing hot food. One of their modulars is cooking up the meals and providing it. I've done a little bit of a Yelp check. That's what I call it. And I try to get some feedback from the guests that come in there and ask them how things are going. And I'm getting pretty good reports. So that's also positive. Since turning it over to Coast, their attendance, which I checked today, is also remaining in the teens. They had one low night where there was only 10, but the rest of the time they're up in their mid-teens to high teens. So it is filling a need for some people that weren't able to get in out of the cold. I guess the only drawback is the location is a little far out of the central area. So some of the people that come, they push their buggies all the way there. But unfortunately, I think that there's some people that would be attending the shelter that just can't get there. So my hope in the future, in the next few years, is that somehow we can find a place that's closer in to provide that assistance. But I was happy to be a part of working all this out, and I believe this is also an extension of the CSSI's work, even though it wasn't something that was expected. But I think it falls into their mandate to help open this area. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm done. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Before I pass it around for council questions, I just want to recognize, I remember back in those days, and those 3 hours of waiting for your decision were pretty hair raising at that time. Kept going back inside Ms. Crabtree's office. Have you heard from him? Have you heard from him? So as much as what the city did was remarkable and were able to execute, we weren't able to do it without your help. I mean, that was for you to step up, greatly appreciated. And I'm so happy to see that you're still part of this process. There's a need there, and we appreciate everything you've done. So on behalf of council, I just want to say thank you for everything you've done to date so far.
By the way, I didn't take the whole 3 hours.
It felt like 6 hours. Having said that, I will open up for Councillor Youssef, followed by Councillor Schiller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Thiessen, for all the work that you have done for the city of Maplebridge and continue to do, especially in this case when on a very short notice, you were able to step up and fill a much needed gap in our community. And just a quick question, if I may, Mr. Chair. Now, having volunteered for the MAP program with the Hope for Freedom organization, there was actually a bus or a shuttle service that would collect individuals who wanted to participate in the program and spend the night. And then also their belongings would be secured or stored somehow. Is there the ability to look for the same type of service, or is there something that we can do to promote the same thing for this program?
The storage issue will be resolved. It slipped through the cracks a bit, but the coast is going to provide a container that they'll drop on the church property. And that is a good thing to have, because then they can push their stuff in there and get it's locked up. It's not opened up. People aren't allowed to go back and forth. They have to wait till the morning to go after their stuff, and that reduces chances of people using in the building and those kind of issues, and does provide some secure. Even when we were running it, there would be the odd guest that would accuse another guest of going through their stuff and stealing things. So it'll eliminate some of that. With respect to transport, that's something that BC Housing probably would never approve again to pay for it, because it's expensive. It does work. It does even allow a particular screening process. If you have people that are assembling at certain known pickup points, before they get in the van, my drivers would screen them, so the people that appeared to be really behaviorally challenged wouldn't even get in the van, and so it reduced some of the other things that can occur in a shelter. So unfortunately, I doubt whether to transport or whatever.
Thank you for that. That is unfortunate, because having seen its success with the MAP program, yeah, it works. Thank you again for all that you continue to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Schiller.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rob, for coming out tonight and presenting to us. And one of the things that I got from your presentation was that you were able to, leverage some relationships that you have from working in the community in the past, and that was to the benefit of the whole community that you were able to do that. But it just makes me wonder about going forward. Do you have any advice for the city, for next year about how we can maybe approach this in a better way, even in terms of timing or things that we could be doing earlier in the year to kind of get ahead of this a little bit more?
Well, on something like this, of course, there's three parties involved in it. It's the city or the area in which the shelter is. Second of all, it's the nonprofit. And one of, probably more important is the funder of the shelter, which is BC Housing. BC Housing has ownership of funding for shelters. And that process, in my observation, those negotiations didn't get started soon enough. And various balls were dropped, and I'm not going to point at anybody in particular, but it was rough. And even once we were able to hand it over, BC Housing still didn't have a budget together. And unfortunately, that's something that happens frequently. My experience in sheltering, which is we ran many shelters, and when it was turned over to BC Housing, when it was the federal government, it was a different story. The money was there at the right particular time. With BC Housing, I frequently wouldn't get a contract until after the shelter was closed in the spring. Now they funded based on our requests, they passed our budget. But as far as a contract goes, now that can be a problem with certain nonprofits that have their own policies and procedures, and they're not going to take the chance and proceed on something without a written contract. So that was one of the weaknesses that was going to occur anyway, I believe. But I spoke to Keir McDonald, I think last Wednesday, and he still hadn't signed a contract. They're funding it, but the contract isn't in place. It may be as we speak, I don't know for sure. But that's, again, that to some organizations, that's an issue. Hope for Freedom, we colored outside the box all the time. So
Thank you for sharing that perspective. And you mentioned you had sort of teens, like average number of people coming to the shelter each night. Appreciating that everybody's situation is different. Can you just sort of tell us a little bit about the situations of those people? Are those people who maybe have been in supportive housing and have left there? Are those people who don't partake sort of in other services but did come in because of the weather? And just trying to understand a little bit more.
well, there were various reasons they would come in. Some would come in because they were banned from other places. My policy was based on behavior. If you behave, we could care less if you've been banned somewhere else. We're not banning you. And we'd also provide a what I would call an amnesty. At the end of every month, when we started a new month, we'd say, okay, word would go out through our outreach team. Okay, all you guys have, with crimes against humanity, you're being forgiven, and you can come back in again as long as you behave. But the other thing that I noticed, first of all, I was quite shocked, having been involved in this for over 20 years, and having lots of conversations and in close proximity to people who are on the street living rough. Some of the people that came in were really in trouble, like physically. You could tell that they were. So I'm a little concerned about that. And the other thing, I suppose, that the reason they would come in is some believed it was going to be safe, safer than other places that they've been. Some of it was because some of them knew me, and unfortunately, they were people I met in this town back in 2017. They were still out there. So there's various reasons and various issues. Now, there are some people that had jobs and they would come in and they'd sort of stick to themselves and difficult to strike up conversations.
Oh,
You can continue.
They weren't necessarily talk too much about their situation, which we try to do. And we leave them alone if they don't want to talk. But the idea is to get a little bit of a background from them with some conversations. But they had jobs and they'd get up in the morning and go off to work. They just didn't have a place to live. So and that's my experience all the way through. There was always a group of people that weren't using drugs and had jobs. Some of them just plain weren't using drugs. They were homeless because of the situation that's out there with housing. So hopefully I've answered your question.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you to you and your staff. Thank you to all the staff here at the city that were involved, and especially to Mayor Rumi, who really showed a lot of leadership in supporting our residents in need. So thank you.
Any further comments? No? Well, then I will end it off with, again, many thanks. I think there's a lot to be learned here, especially the need for the ability to be flexible. These are folks that, for whatever reasons, find themselves outside, and cold weather is not a good place to be. So again, thank you very much. And we're going to take these lessons learned so that next year we'll make sure that we're ready for it. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to move on to item 7, our consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, we have 4 items on the consent agenda, and the recommendation is that the recommendations contained in each of the 4 items be received into the record. So we've got disbursements for the month ended December 31st, 2022, 2022 council expenses for the month ended December 31st, 2022, development agreements committee minutes for January 18th, 20th, and 25th, and committee appointments that were released from the closed meeting held on January 24th.
Thank you very much. Ken, you guys are right on top of it. A motion moved by Councillor Duick, seconded by Councillor Schiller. Any discussions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? It is unanimous. We will move on to the next portion, which will be section 9.
So, Mr. Mayor, we have item 9.1. It is third reading for an application number 2016-202-RZ for the property at 20556 Dewdney Trunk Road. The rezoning from RS1 to CD221 to permit the rezoning to allow the future construction of 4 mixed-use buildings with approximately 296 rental residential units and 280 market residential units.
Can I get a motion to move this? Moved by Councillor Duick and seconded by Councillor Youssef. Any questions? We have staff here. I don't know if the developers are here online. No. Okay. So Councillor Youssef, followed by Councillor Schiller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you to staff, just real quick, will this building be going in under the new rate of the community development charges?
That is correct.
And this, if I may, again, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, this is the first step in the increase, or there's a second step that's to come, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions. As for comment, I believe this is the type of application that is approaching the future and potential of Maple Ridge with these types of buildings coming in that are mixed use, that provide not only places to live, but also opportunities for jobs to be local. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Schiller.
Thank you, Chair. To staff, I was just interested to know about the number of bicycle and e-mobility storage or parking spaces that were being provided.
That is determined by the actual parking bylaw. It does meet the bylaw. I do not have that number in front of me right now, I'm afraid. But they do meet the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And yeah, just echoing Councillor Youssef's comments, I think, we're moving forward with this type of densification and there's a lot of benefits to that. I think we need to make sure that we're providing, the hundreds of residents in this building with some viable alternatives to get around. And so glad to see some cycling support there, and just look to the city and the developer to do whatever they can to provide that kind of walkable neighborhood that we need. Thank you.
Seeing no other comments or questions, I will call the question. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Motion has been carried. We're going to move on to 9.2.
Item 9.2 is third reading for application 2021-104-RZ on St. Anne Avenue. Rezoning from RS1 to RM2 to permit the rezoning to allow the future construction of a 5-story apartment building with 20 residential units.
Can I get a motion? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Carreras. Again, open for discussion or comments. Again, I don't see, is the developer? Okay, okay. So we've done our motion. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, Councillor Youssef.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. I was contemplating whether or not to pose the question and what context, given that some of the discussion was in camera. But when we're amending the policy, through you to staff, when we're amending the policy 3.38, which I believe governs the height of buildings in southern Haney, to accommodate this 6-story building, are we I'm assuming, and of course I'm pretty sure that the geotechnical reports for this property have demonstrated that it can handle the height of a 6-story building. But then again, we're amending the policy in this case. So by doing so, are we signaling something that we ought not signal just yet? It's a tricky question. I apologize.
Through the chair, thank you very much. The actual bylaw here is amending a higher height for this building. It's an individual one-off thing. We're also, council's given us direction previously to look at allowing 6-story buildings in entirety down in this area. So for an application to be dealt with, we have a 2-pronged approach. Council may approve the increased heights in the future, but you cannot deal with this application unless you delayed it. So it has its own specific amendment here to allow this building to proceed. Otherwise, it would have to sit for months, probably waiting for council to decide on that other one. So it's an approach to try and keep moving housing projects forward.
I appreciate that very much in keeping the applications moving through and just wanting to ensure that the city is moving forward on solid footing. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was my question.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions or comments, I will call the question. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Motion is carried. Moving on to 9.3.
Item 9.3 is third reading for application 2021-233-RZ for 20383 Osprey Street, rezoning from RS1 to R1 to permit the rezoning to allow a future 2-lot subdivision.
Thank you. Can I get a motion? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Schiller. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? And it is unanimous. Motion has been carried. Moving on to 9.4.
Item 9.4 is third reading and adoption for application 2022-304-RZ for 20644 Dudney Trunk Road to permit a group childcare center at the subject property.
Can I get a motion? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Doze. Any comments, questions? Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. When this was going in, did we do a traffic impact study ahead of approving or recommending that this application be approved?
Through the chair, I don't believe this would meet the criteria for such an exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And assuming that the particular use is allowed in the area and would not be as detrimental to neighboring business is why staff would recommend this moving forward.
Through the chair, councils have always supported childcare, additional childcare within the community. So that's the reason why this amendment is being made. It's a site-specific amendment to allow it only in this location. There's a similar use just to the east on 207th in the, I'm not quite sure the name of the mall there is, but there is, it was approved about a year and a half or two ago. So this is just a continuation of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
Seeing no further comments or questions, I will call the question. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Motion has been carried. Now we're going to go on to item 10, committee reports and recommendations.
Mr. Mayor, we have item 10.1, application number 2017-548-RZ for 12313 McNutt Road. It's a rezoning from RS3 to RS2 to rezone the property to permit a future subdivision of approximately 2 lots for second reading as amended and forwarded to the public hearing.
Okay, can I get a motion? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Doze. Any comments or questions? Councillor Youssef, followed by Councillor Schiller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real brief, I'd like to signal that I do have some concerns about the slopes on the property, especially since it will be going on septic. Realizing that it's only a 2-lot subdivision, which will not exert that great a pressure on the surrounding environment. I'm just cognizant of the actual slopes on the property and how that would affect the functionality of the septic systems that will be going in. However, I do trust and believe that our environmental department will have it in hand and will support the recommendation as such. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to flag the request from the fire department that makes up part of this item. And I understand that is coming separately, the request that the fire department does have, but I just thought I would take this opportunity to say that I do think it's a good, that we should be taking advantage of development in this area to support the requests of the first responders. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing as how there's no further comments or questions, we'll call it. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Motion has been carried. Moving on to 10.2.
Item 10.2 is application number 2018-132-RZ for the property at 12121 232nd Street, rezoning from RS3 to R1 to permit a future subdivision to create 3 single-family residential lots. It's for second reading as amended and to be forwarded to public hearing.
Thank you. Can I get a motion? Moved by Councillor Doze, seconded by Councillor Youssef. Any questions or comments? Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is about the walkway here, and it's part of the recommended terms and conditions from staff. And just wanted to note that we received a question from the community about the design of that walkway and whether it would be suitable for both pedestrians and other modes of active transportation, or whether it would be just for pedestrians. I'm going to put out there that this may be a land use. This discussion specifically might just be land use, and maybe the design will come further. But if staff could maybe provide some explanation around that, that would be useful.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So if I go through the mayor to council, and so we received the correspondence, and the intent is certainly for it to be a multi-purpose connection, and so we'll look at that from the design criteria when it comes forward and review that to make sure that we can get cyclists and strollers and those sorts of things through the entranceway, as suggested that did in the correspondence.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Motion has been carried. I'm going to move on to item 10.3.
Item 10.3 is for application number 2022-195-RZ for the property at 24340 and 24360 102 Avenue, rezoning from RS3 to R3 to permit a future subdivision of approximately 5 single-family lots. Is for first reading, and that the applicant provide further information as outlined in the report.
Thank you very much. Can I get a motion? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Doze. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call it. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Motion has been carried. Going to move on to item 10.4.
Item 10.4 is application number 2022-311-DVP for the property at 22977 116th Avenue. It's a development variance permit to increase the permitted fence height to 1.5 meters or 5.0 feet for the portion of fencing along the Lougheed Highway to address residents' concerns on noise, privacy, and security. The recommendation is that it be denied.
Thank you very much. Can I get a motion? Point of order? Point of order, Councillor Youssef?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My point of order is to inquire as to whether we would be able to amend the motion on the floor prior to moving it or seconding it, or if we must then, by voting in opposition to the current motion on the floor, if that would lend to it being approved.
So the first thing is we have a motion on the floor that we want to pass the motion so we can have this discussion first.
That's my point of order. Are we able to amend the motion prior to moving it?
Yes.
Yes.
Because then if we can amend it to approve.
So if you have two choices, you can make the recommended motion, and then if you decide after your discussion that you do not want to pass that motion, you can defeat the motion and then make a different motion. The other option is to make a motion at the beginning to recommend that it be approved, if that's what you would like to do, then have your discussion and then a vote on it after.
I would like to pursue the latter course of action, Mr. Chair, rather than bringing the motion onto the floor and then defeating it. I'd like to amend the motion right now prior to moving it and seconding it, and then we can have the discussion if my colleagues will agree.
So you'd like to move the motion that the application be approved?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Point of order.
Sorry, I just want to double check that I know the process here, so we all are on clear. So there is a motion that's been made to approve. There is no amendment. It's a new motion.
It's a new motion.
So when
yes.
we do vote for this, we're voting for the motion. We're not voting for the
Yes,
amendment.
that's correct.
Okay, so I
Yes.
wanted to clarify. It's a
So-
straight motion, no amendment.
The motion has been moved by
Yes.
Councillor Youssef. We need a seconder if we're going to keep it. Is there a seconder for that motion?
We have a seconder.
Okay.
Yeah, Councillor Duick. So just so that I'm clear on this, we've moved the motion
To approve.
to approve. We
Yes.
don't need to amend it.
No.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion to approve. So we're open up for discussion at this point. Councillor Duick, followed by Councillor Youssef, followed by Councillor Carreras, followed by, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, we're actually approving the alternative that is in the package. And so to be clear, I understand why staff did present the motion that they did, because as was noted at Committee of the Whole, that is what our policy says. So therefore they are saying that we need to adhere to our policy. Council, of course, can do what we are discussing right now. I went by that neighborhood. We all received the same emails and everything. And Lougheed Highway is certainly a different corridor than some of the other corridors. So I am willing to look at it for this particular unit, especially because right next door to them, there's single family homes that are backing onto Lougheed that have a fence that's as high as they're requesting. The other piece is because of the two road frontages, even though their address is on Lougheed, so it technically it's the front of their property, but it's really not the front of their units, because their units, that's their backyard, so it's a bit confusing. But also because of 116th, there's lots of trespassing that goes through there, lots of people jumping over to take shortcuts. So I think in this particular case, it would be the right thing to do to support the strata to have a higher fence. They are talking about, I think of a pretty aesthetically pleasing type of fence. Perhaps there's some options to look at, maybe a little bit of a height variance that staff could look at. So it's not just one big wall, but I am happy to support it with as per their request. And as I said, appreciate why staff presented the motion that they did. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carreras. You had your hand up.
I know, but I wasn't sure the order. Thank you. I just really thank you, Councillor Dewick. I think you just shared everything that was on my mind. Again, I get this was policy, but this is a really unique situation. And for me, I support the approval on a one-off, knowing that it is a high traffic area, and though it's the front, we say it's their backyard, and that it truly is, it doesn't take away from, I think, the overall aesthetics of that community, where most of them, almost everything else is a back or a side and has the higher fence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Echoing Councillor Dewick's comments, fully understanding where staff were coming from in recommending that this be denied, and my apologies to them, but it is, I fully understand their position. However, in this case, having lived in that neighborhood for over 10 years and seen how that particular property is definitely affected by the pedestrian traffic as well as the vehicle traffic on Lougheed, it made more sense to go against the policy in this case and against staff recommendation to better serve the community and the neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller.
Along the same lines, just want to express that I do understand the intent of the bylaw, and I agree with it. In this particular location, I think it's fair to ask for the variance, and I support the owners in being able to put up the higher fence. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Councillor Dewick.
It's sort of related. I think this just speaks to sometimes with some of our policies and bylaws, there's no ability for flexibility for staff to be able to even have made this decision. So something worthy of us to consider is that had staff been able to do this, it wouldn't even had to come to council. But our policy is so stringent that they didn't have that ability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further comments or questions, and just to be clear, we will be voting on allowing the fence to 5 feet. That is the motion, and that's what we'll be voting on. Correct? Okay, good. Just got to make sure. All those in favor of this motion to approve the variance? It is unanimous. The motion has been carried. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to staff reports. 11.
Mr. Mayor, we have item 11.1. It's a staff report recommending that the 2023 council meeting schedule be amended to include a regular council meeting on March the 7th, and that business planning be rescheduled to March 27th and 29th.
Can I get a motion? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Carreras. Any comments or questions regarding this motion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Motion has been carried. Now we will move on to question period. Is there anybody in chambers who would like to step up and say anything? Seeing none, anybody online? Nobody online. Okay, no question period. That takes us to the end of our evening. Oh, sorry. Mayor and council reports. Any mayor and council reports? Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. All right, we're going to start off with Councillor Carreras, followed by Councillor Youssef.
This is our favorite part as counselors. We'll never let you forget this. We get to share all the great things happening in our community. I just want to share two quick things. One is I attended my first committee meeting last night, and it was the Maple Ridge Pitt Meadows Arts Council, and Stefan was there as staff, and it was an absolute pleasure to be able to attend. Of course, the Arts Council is dear to my heart, as I was on there over 5 years ago now and past president, and they're doing really truly beautiful work in our community. And it was really nice to hear an update as to how far they've come, especially overcoming COVID. And it seems like things are slowly starting to return to some normalcy within the art community. And their arts programming is sort of very, very full, almost overprescribed. And the need in the community is really warms my heart to see so many people participating in arts and culture activities within our community. Also just want to share, I was able to attend, there's a 3-part panel put on by the University of Fraser Valley around local governments and Indigenous governments and the path forward and how we can work together. And I attended the first panel, which was fostering connections that last, conversations with civic and Indigenous relationship building. And it was about an hour and a half long, and it was online, so it was easy to attend. But I don't know if any of my fellow colleagues get the emails, but it was a really great panel. And I'm really looking forward to the next two when they come up, how we can build that relationship stronger in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Along with all of us, I believe we attended the eMolly facility visit on Thursday, the 19th. I unfortunately had to skip out early as I did pay the UBC Malcolm Knapp Research Forest a visit and was truly impressed with the facilities that they have up there, as well as, of course, the plans to expand the facilities that they have up there to welcome more hikers, seekers of knowledge to their property up there, and of course the tourism that will come of it as a benefit to us, and how Maple Ridge can cooperate and collaborate with them. I've also taken the liberty of inviting them to appear as a delegation before mayor and council to present in more detail what their plans are. On the 25th, Wednesday, I had a meeting with Green Teams Canada and also invited them to come appear as a delegation. My apologies to my colleagues. You're going to get a little spammed here because this is an organization and a group that involves youths in getting outside and doing environmental projects using their hands. I couldn't think of a better thing to do with our time and how to involve our youth really in getting out there and doing actual work in nature and getting their hands dirty. So I'm all on board with them, and I'm looking forward to many of the organizations that I'm involved with, be it the Climate Hub, Keeps as the council liaison arms, and even the Interact Club that's now been recently established to build those synergies and see what we can do here in our community. On Friday night, according to Mr. Smith, I had nothing better to do. So I paid the McClure Drive traffic calming open house a visit, and it was pleasant to see the community coming out and participating, and that the participation was quite positive, and that the community wanted to work with the city to get to where they need to be and to establish that. So that was a nice visit. Going back to Wednesday, the 18th, was actually my first meeting with the Liquid Waste Committee at Metro Vancouver. And the good news is that the Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows portion of the network did come up on the screens in a pink color, which is a good thing. There was only a small portion of black where there was some work to be done. And of course, the new facility that we see going in is meant to address that. The not so good news was a comment that was made by some of the staff about how the infrastructure would fare in the event of a significant seismic activity. While unsettling, they are aware of where their most vulnerable crossings are, and they're working to stabilize that. So that's somewhat a good news, silver lining, if you will, as well as, of course, having had the discussion about different coatings, polymers to not only prolong the lifespan of assets that are in the ground, but provide better protection against infiltration and inflow of stormwater and other sources into the system. And that, Mr. Chair, does conclude my council report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe Councillor Duick, followed by Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I attended my first Seniors Network meeting. It was really well attended. The mayor was there to do a presentation, and he did a really good job outlining all the work that the current council and staff have been working on and moving forward, what some of the things like whether it was the CSSI program or the housing or economic development. You did an amazing job. In your 30 minutes, you actually covered a lot of information, and I could see a lot of people around the table pretty excited about the work that we're doing. And he actually made me cry, the mayor, because he was complimenting me around the table, and I wasn't really prepared for that. So, but great group of people. There's a number of task forces. Amazing the work that this group is doing. They have age-friendly community task force, of course, the Alouette Men's Shed, the Community Response Network, Dementia Friendly, and on it goes. There's just a number of task force that work to benefit the seniors in our community. So I'm really looking forward to being part of that. And I know that they will have lots of ideas for us to consider, and I look forward to that. So thank you for your presentation. You did a really great job.
Thank you. I had no intention of making anybody cry.
It was
However,
tears of happiness, by the way.
having
I should
said
say
that, I will add to that piece of saying that the Community Network is a fantastic organization. The folks around there really represent quite a bit of Maple Ridge, and it's exciting to see where they're going. And it was exciting to see the Men's Shed. They're a new club that's on their way up and having a big impact on the community. So thank you for your kind words. Appreciate it. Moving on to Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few things. The first is I'm thrilled to see that we have a homegrown business in Maple Ridge that recently got international attention. Canna Compost Systems. I was thrilled to learn is a semi-finalist in the Deep Space Food Challenge. The challenge is organized by the Canadian Space Agency in collaboration with NASA and some other prestigious organizations. And they look at new ways to compost food. They're looking at black soldier flies. And I'm just thrilled because I think this is just one great representation of the thriving business community that we have in Maple Ridge. And it's such a wonderful representation of Maple Ridge. We're urban, we're rural, we are agricultural, and it's just a fantastic combination of all these things. So I'm just thrilled to see that. Second thing I'd like to share is I was happy to take a visit down to the Ridge Meadows Recycling Society depot last week, and I spoke with the wonderful folks there, and I got a tour of the depot. And one thing that I was thrilled to learn is that the majority of our plastics, almost 100% of plastics that we put out for recycling in BC stays in BC, which if you're like me, have been consuming a lot of podcasts in PR, John Oliver shows about how recycling gets sent to different parts of the world and doesn't actually end up in recycling. I was very happy to be reassured by the folks at the Recycling Society that's not the case for plastics in BC. So you can feel free to make the effort, wash out your plastics, put it in the bin, because reduce if you can. You don't have to use that plastic, fantastic, but if you do, please recycle, because it doesn't end up in a garbage bin. That's not how it works here in BC. And the last thing I'd like to share is I was lucky, if you honored to be the liaison to the youth planning table from council, and I got to sit around a table of service providers that work with our youth in our community. And one thing they share many great things. And one thing I really heard across the table from the different service providers is how we really need a youth safe house in our community. They said to me, look, if a 14-year-old, for some reason, whatever it is, something happens and they just can't go home that night, they've got nowhere else to go. there's no space in our community, and we all know what's going on for affordable housing, how we have a crisis. And so that's really something that struck me. And so I put that out there. And the last thing I want to say is that, I want to put it out there to any young people who are listening, who are interested in what it's like to be an elected representative of community. Please feel free to reach out to me. And I'm sure any of our other councillors on the mayor would be happy to hear from them, because I know it can be a large challenge or barrier to being like, who, me? Could I be an elected representative? And I want to say, like, if I can do it, I'm nothing special. You all can all do it. And I'd love to share with you. And I'm sure any of our other elected representatives will be happy to share with you. So that's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. Councillor Doze.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just wanted to say that I went through my own baptism of fire on Wednesday, January 25th, when I joined the seniors. I was more embarrassed than actually getting to do the job, because, I mean, sending people at the door to come and welcome me as if I'm a rock star was so embarrassing, to say the least. But generally speaking, it was a very good, warm reception I got from them. We met, and I also made them understand that I'm a senior myself too, so that they don't have to treat me as if they are just welcoming Michael Jackson, Yeah. So, but seriously speaking, the program there was quite informative, and I was there watching seniors come in and go, and I was made to understand that our mayor lives upstairs, because I was going to blow the house and say, hey, who is living here? And they told me the mayor was there, and it was generally something, to be honest, I'm elated to be involved in, because of the programs they have for the seniors. Most importantly, one of the things they were complaining about was that people don't seem to kind of take advantage of all the facilities they have for them. A lot of people don't even know that they existed. And to be honest to you, I know they are there, but I didn't know the depth of the services they provide to the community. So I want to seize this opportunity to call all the seniors out there to please remember that we have that particular organization there, Ridge Meadows Senior Society, to please try and see what they have to offer to you, that they have all the goodies that you might need in your life. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. And finally, Councillor Schiller.
Thank you very much. I had the opportunity to attend my first in-person meeting of the Fraser Valley Regional Library Board last week. And as someone who knows the important role that libraries play in our community, I'm just looking very forward to being part of this group. They seem like a very fun group. We held the elections for the 2023 board during that meeting. And we also got a report from the library CEO, who was just explaining some of the work that they've done during 2022. And of course, like many organizations, it was sort of a year of returning to in-person programming. And they were also sharing that there's a really big appetite for in-person programs. But for some of their events, the online has provided real opportunities as well for people. It's just a different or more convenient option. And so they are looking to continue in-person and online offerings going ahead. I also briefly dropped by the McClure Drive Traffic open house. And I just want to acknowledge the great job that staff did. They had it all laid out very clearly what the process was and sort of how decisions were being made. There was a really good turnout happening there. And it was just really nice to see that there is that option for people to engage with the city around traffic in their neighborhood, because that is something that we often hear about. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I will go on there's on my end. I mean, I've started our committees, so I'm on the Climate Action Committee with Metro Van. That was most of the meetings I've been going to are orientation still, so we're just starting to get into the nitty gritty. But what stood out for me with the Climate Action Committee was the amount of data that Metro Van has on air quality and how they measure everything. So I'm looking forward to getting deep into this because we obviously want to be able to talk about climate action as we continue to move forward. I'm also on Metro Housing Committee. I'm the vice chair. And again, just starting that whole process of laying out where they are at and how they can help the different communities. Finally, I want to recognize the Saturday was Literacy Day, and I went to the library. What an exciting place to be. I miss the library. There were different organizations there, having their pamphlets in their booth, but more importantly, it was all about literacy, and seeing the families and the young children there says that to me, we have so much that we can do for our community. And in fact, when we talk about our verbal reports, this is our opportunity. This is what being an elected official to me is all about. It's engaging with our community in many different ways and sharing of information. The senior center, you're absolutely right. There are so many activities they've got going on, and the ones that do know, go. The ones that have no idea, don't go. So that's an opportunity for us to be able to share with our community all the great things that are going on. So I want to thank everybody for their presentations. Looking forward to hearing more as we get deeper into our committees. And thank you very much. Thank you to the library for their great presentation for Literacy Day again. Having said that, any notices of motion and matters for a future meeting? Seeing none, then I will call adjournment. It is 8 o'clock. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.